Hello and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is, that's...
What is today?
What is today? Quick, somebody. Today 14th? Is January 14th. Thank you,
right?
2006.
That's my guess.
I am
15th.
your host.
15th.
15th.
Thank you.
Oh, boy. This is a great start. This is a great start to my last show as the host. I'll go out on this blundering note.
It's an honor to be here beside you as you blunder your way through your last show, Russell.
Why, thank you. I could do a big speech today, but of course I'll continue on as co-host, so all that means is that I show up less, but I get more control over the topic when I am here, so it's all good.
Whoa, co-host. Are you guys kicking the rest of us out and you taking on the co-host spot full-time?
I'll be rotating.
You're rotating
just like
with the
you.
Rest of us. Okay.
Nothing will change except that Matt Dillahunty will be the host. He'll be here all the time, and I'll be in the spot where he used to be as co-host.
And congratulations to Matt for putting up with those of us that thought he ought to actually prove himself before he took on the chair full time, and he's done an excellent job.
Yes, he has.
He's going to be great.
Right. So I'm Russell Glasser, your host. My co-host is Jeff Dee this week.
Hi, folks.
And I'm bailing out of the host position because I've just started classes at the University of Texas. I had my orientation yesterday, or I had my orientation on Friday, rather, and met all the great people with whom I will be spending the next 2 years, and they seemed like a pretty cool bunch. And if you're one of them and you happen to see me on TV at some point, hi, I'm an atheist.
Cool.
Let's see. We are sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a non-profit organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's at 1500 Barton Springs Road, west of South Lamar. That starts at 11:30 and is open to any atheist or atheist-friendly people. You don't need to be a member to come. That's every Sunday except for the third Sunday of each month when we have our lecture series at the Austin History Center on 9th and Guadalupe. Those start at 12:30. Today would have normally been a lecture day, but instead of having a regular lecture, we took a tour of the Inner Space Caverns with ACA member Joe Zemecki as our guide. That was a lot of fun. Jeff and I were both there, as were many of the ACA members.
We had 25 people, counted them.
Yes.
I think that's including Joe.
I would go so far as to say that this is one of the most successful ACA social events, non-recurring social events that we've ever had. Mm-hmm. So if you weren't there, you missed out. We'll be talking about that a little, probably. The next lecture will be on February 19th. Our other regular events include Godless Gamers every Monday at 7 o'clock at my house. See the website, www.atheist-community.org, for details. You can find out how to contact me there or email tv@atheist-community.org, and I will receive that mail. We also have an Atheist Happy Hour on Thursdays at 7:30 at Antonio's Tex-Mex on the southbound feeder of I-35, just south of 183. Unholy Rollers is an atheist roller skating event every Tuesday night at Playland on McCann Drive, near 183 and Burnett. You can check the website calendar for more information on regular and special events. And then there's our regular internet audio show called The Nonprofits every Saturday on freethoughtradio.com. The show is hosted by Jeff Dee, co-hosted by Dennis Lubay, and also features Matt Dillahunty and myself. The next live show will be on January 28th. Yesterday.
Yeah, and also Free Thought Radio is actually...
That, yeah.
Okay.
Yesterday was a live show.
Go ahead.
However, Free Thought Radio is off the air for a month for, maintenance and upgrading. So if you tried to tune in yesterday and you couldn't hear us, it wasn't because we weren't broadcasting, actually. You should always check the website, nonprofitsradio.com. If you need more information, that will also tell you how to get into the chat room. You can also subscribe to the podcast of the Nonprofits just by hunting down basically atheist or nonprofits or anything you can think of associated with the Nonprofits in the podcast section of iTunes. Also, I'm pleased to announce that this very show has just gotten its own podcast, and you can check the website, atheist-experience.com, and you can see how you can regularly receive the audio portion of this show fed straight to your iTunes or your iPod. So, technology is great. The ACA has a board meeting on the second Sunday of every month before the regular meeting. Currently, we are going to Schlotsky's Deli on 218 South Lamar, south of the bridge. All ACA members are welcome to come and sit in on board meetings, but only board members may vote. The next board meeting will be on February 12th. If you enjoy the program today and you think you would like to come and meet us, we regularly get together for dinner after the show. Right now we're going to Mongolian Barbecue at 117 San Jacinto Boulevard. To get there, just head a few blocks west of 1st Street from I-35. West on 1st Street from I-35. Mongolian Barbecue is a big Asian buffet. And as with our other events, all atheists and atheist-friendly people are welcome to come join us, but of course you shouldn't come there to proselytize because we just can't wait to take your calls on this show, and it's really not necessary to disturb our dinner to do that. We will be going there after the show today and arriving at around 6:45, and of course check the date on the screen. Today is January 15th, 2006, and if that's not the date when you're watching, then you'll probably go to an empty room. So that does it for our regular announcements. So should we talk about the cave first?
Sure, let's talk about the cave.
Okay. We went to the cave.
The cave was cool. It
was very cool.
Inner
Space. Inner Space
I got
Caverns.
it right. I've had a lot of trouble keeping my cave straight. Yeah.
Yes, according to our godless tour guide, it was many hundreds of thousands of years old. I can't remember exactly how old. But there are plenty of structures there that took hundreds of thousands of years to build up. And of course, creationists think that for some reason God just likes making things look like they're hundreds of thousands of years old. Joe Zemecki, our guide, told us that he takes great pleasure in telling people how old things are, and he said, surprisingly enough, that he's never been challenged on those ages until today.
Well, we did it. Somebody in our group did it for fun.
Joking.
Yeah, but you know, these when scientists say how old, say, a stalactite is,
right?
I mean, they're not just pulling that number out of thin air. When the cave was discovered by geologists checking to make sure that the ground was sturdy enough to hold up Highway 35 when that was going through, when geologists dug down through the ground and their drills came out in the cave, they left these holes. And the processes that form stalactites haven't stopped since then, and you can see inside the cave the actual holes that were drilled and the beginnings of little stalactites starting to form from seepage through the holes drilled in the rock.
Yeah.
And they know when those holes were drilled, because that was like, what, 30, 40 years ago? I forget the exact date. And but they know the exact date, and they can measure those things and see how quickly the process goes. I mean, this is not wild guesses. And so the only way out for people that want to reject the the scientific evidence for how old the Earth is to just say that there's a magical guy that made it all look like that, even though that's the way the laws operate now, that sometime in the past it all just got created, fully formed, just to trick us into thinking that it was older.
Yeah, and it essentially makes God into a liar, because why did he bother making these elaborate processes that make it appear as
not a liar.
Okay.
A con artist.
Okay, that's much better. One of the things that's always, I mean, you do hear people say that God could create things with the appearance of age.
Well, sure, but as soon as you invoke magic, anything could happen.
Yeah, like then there's a popular comeback, which is last Thursdayism, right?
Right.
The universe could have been created last Thursday, even though you think you remember however many years you've lived. God actually just implanted those memories straight into your head to give the illusion that it was actually an old universe.
Yeah.
And one of the things I find funny about that is that stars give off light that takes a certain amount of time to travel to us. And if the universe is actually less than 6,000 years old, then you're seeing light from stars that don't actually exist.
Well, don't have to exist, because, the argument, again, and there have been creationists that postulated this with a straight face, that God created the light already on its way from those apparent distant stars.
Right. So that's an awful lot of trouble to go through when he could have just made made the universe and let this stuff happen.
Sure. As ancients used to think that stars were like, pinholes in some kind of solid shell, or that they were actual small lights affixed to the inside of some solid shell surrounding the Earth. And you know what? If there was a magical guy that created everything, he could have just made that. There wouldn't have been any problem with having to create light already on its way. He could have just made a universe that worked exactly the way they used to think it did. So, what you can do.
But we digress from the cave, which was
you
just
can't actually see any stars
fun.
from inside the cave.
Yeah, we got the special tour, which means we not only walked in the place where there was installed electrical lighting, we got to head into some of the back passages of the cave where the only lights are some of the flashlights that were handed out.
If I understood Joe correctly, that's the special adventure tour, and we didn't actually do all of it. I mean, that's the name for it.
That's just as well, because I was kind of tired at that point.
But yeah.
We got to wander around different side passages of the cave with our little flashlights, and at one point we got to all turn our flashlights off and see that it was indeed pitch black.
Yeah.
So that was great.
You'd expect. So yeah, that was a fun time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joe, for going to all that trouble to get this tour together. And Joe Zemecki is a very accomplished tour guide. You can tell his little tour guide mannerisms, and his tour guide speaking voice, and his canned tour guide jokes, which are actually quite good. So if you go to Inner Space Caverns, Joe is a great guy to have. So you want me to move on with my presentation for today? Of course.
This has been in the news, and I just want to read some highlights. A capsule carrying dust particles from the tail of a comet parachuted to Earth this morning, and elated NASA scientists are eager to examine the samples for clues about how the solar system formed. The Stardust mission capsule landed 2 minutes ahead of schedule at the Air Force's Utah Test and Training Range southwest of Salt Lake City. Stardust has been in space for just shy of 7 years and made 3 laps around the sun, traveling 2.88 billion miles. The highlight of the mission came on January 2, 2004, when Stardust flew within 149 miles of the comet Wild 2. Stardust captured particles from the comet's tail in a tennis racket-sized collection unit made with blocks of aerogel, a strong, lightweight silica glass that is 99.8% air and looks like frozen smoke. The fundamental reason for this mission is that we are collecting what we believe are the best preserved samples of the formation of our solar system, and they are preserved because they formed these cometary bodies beyond the major planets out past Pluto, said principal investigator Don Brownlee of the University of Washington. Comets are icy, rocky debris left over from the beginning of the solar system 4.5 billion years ago. Wild 2 is thought to come from the Kuiper Belt, a band of debris that orbits the Sun past Neptune. Scientists expect that analysis of the Stardust samples will help them better understand how the planets formed and evolved. David Jewett, an astronomer at the University of Hawaii, said the Kuiper Belt objects appear as faint, unresolved points of light, even in the world's largest telescopes. He said astronomers can count them and track their orbits and even learn some things about their surface composition, but they are too far away for us to learn about their geography. What Stardust hopefully picked up in the aerogel collectors is in some sense a sample of materials from the Kuiper Belt, so that's exciting too, he said, because we don't have the technology to go out to the Kuiper Belt, grab some stuff, and then come back with it. Well, that's fascinating. First of all, there's the 4.5 billion year age of the solar system, and this I started thinking about this when we got an email from one of our listeners on the audio show, who pointed out that, setting aside this whole evolution thing, which the fundamentalists have just lost. The next, they first they came up with creationism. Then that was clearly religion, and it was prohibited from public schools. Then they repackaged it and called it intelligent design, and now that's been identified as just a repackaging of creationism. It's just as inappropriate for our government to be in the business of indoctrinating its citizens in the beliefs of a particular religion as it ever has been. And there probably will be more court cases because the Dover, Pennsylvania trial only covers that particular district, but I think the writing is on the wall as far as the creationism movement is concerned. But this listener to our audio show said, well, what about cosmology? What about the formation of planets? What are the creationists and fundamentalists to say about those issues? I mean, even if they had won on evolution, even if they could claim that it was a valid scientific theory to talk about life having been created by an intelligent designer, we have telescopes that can look out in space and see solar systems in every stage of development, from clouds of dust up through solar systems where the sun has burnt out, gone nova, and eaten its nearby planets. Every single stage in solar system formation is visible through our telescopes. He pointed out a particular news story, and I'm going to read this other little short thing here. This is from December 15th of last year. Astronomers have spotted a swirling debris cloud around a sun-like star where terrestrial planets similar to Earth may be forming in a process that could shed light on the birth of our own solar system. The star, located 137 light-years away, appears to possess an asteroid belt, a zone where leftovers of failed planets collide. Terrestrial planets with those rocky surfaces, terrestrial planets are those with rocky surfaces as opposed to a gas composition like Jupiter. What do creationists say about this stuff? I mean, I know we talked earlier about the cockamamie, God created the light on the way here. What, God also created the light to look like a star system that's forming? To make it look exactly like it takes billions of years for dust in space to collapse under gravitational force into a star and its surrounding ring of planets?
I think if they thought about it at all, their answer would be that God does it all for our benefit, so that we may marvel at his awesomeness.
That's fine, but there's all kinds of things you could do to look awesome that don't provide direct evidence of one's own non-existence if you're a god, right? I mean, he could have hung the paintings that he did in his spare time way out there in space, so that until we had good enough telescopes, we couldn't see what a fine painter he was. For example, solar systems are not an example of the amazing creative power of God. They're an example of the amazing effects of natural laws of gravity and physics as we understand them now. And it takes nobody to make them. So that, I guess that's my question for any true believers out there watching the show. What is your answer to stuff like this? I mean, the evolution thing is over. Give it up. But on the question of like the formation of star systems, presumably that's where you have to fall back to now and make that your next line of attack. What do you have to say about that? I'm done.
Oh, already?
Now we should take some calls.
Yeah,
we can talk about it more.
We are taking calls. Today is of course, we always have open lines for phone calls, and the number should be appearing at the bottom of your screen, right down there.
Yeah.
And if you don't see a number down there, it's because today is a rerun. But if you do see the number, then call right in. Regarding the creationist movement.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Regarding the creationist movement, one thing that happens every time they suffer some sort of major defeat, which they just did in Dover, is they rebrand themselves.
Oh boy, are you going to get Intelligent Design 2? What would they call it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it just gets vaguer and vaguer every time. I mean, first it was creationism, and then it was scientific creationism, and then it was intelligent design sometime after Edwards versus Aguilard. In fact, there was a situation where the intelligent design textbook in the Dover trial, this was great. They actually had a paragraph they had all these places in the textbook where in its first printing it said creationism, and in its later printings it said intelligent design, but nothing was changed.
Right,
even
just the
even
word
including the definition of creationism. Creationism means blah blah blah, and they just turned that into intelligent design means blah blah blah. And so now there's some sort of buzz that they're going around trying to come up with another thing to call themselves so that they can disassociate themselves with intelligent design, which the judge just ruled, yes, just like creationism, it is religion. And William Dembski, who is one of the funny people who goes around and tries to come up with policies for it, recently said something like, okay, we should change our focus so that the things that evolution clearly seems to do, it doesn't look like we're challenging that, but we're still saying that's not enough. So we'll call it like intelligent evolution or something like that. And then it has evolution in it, so they'll be able to teach that.
Oh boy.
And
boy, oh boy.
One might humbly suggest that maybe your methodology is wrong and not your marketing.
Yeah. On the subject of other solar systems in the universe, like as recently as 10, 15 years ago, we had good reason to think that stars throughout the universe were actually surrounded by planets, but we had no direct evidence. And now there's a fine website, actually there's several fine websites, but one I particularly recommend is www.extrasolar.net, extrasolar.net, which is a catalog of all of the planets that have been detected orbiting other stars. And it's really fascinating stuff. You'll find that the vast majority of other planets that we know about so far are great big gas giants, but that's because the way that scientists are mostly detecting other planets right now is by wobbles in the position of a star as the gravity that's exerted by its orbiting gas giant moves the star around. But here's a terribly exciting thing. There's a telescope in Hawaii, the Keck Interferometer, is able to block the glare of a star so that they can look directly at its surrounding dust cloud and or planets. And that thing has been tested, they know it works, and it's going to begin its mission of systematically photographing the planetary systems around nearby stars this year.
Wow.
Now, I'm maybe going a little too far with that. I haven't seen pictures that it's made. From what I read, they clearly think it's going to be at least somewhat successful at photographing planets, down to planets as small as Earth. So, it might not pick out the moon, but you'd get a dot that showed you that there was an Earth-sized planet there. And that just seems to me like we're on the verge of, this whole thing about the formation of star systems. Not only is that a great big question that the creationists have yet to address in any rational sense, but it's only going to get worse, and it's going to start getting worse real soon.
Great.
So, we got any calls yet?
We had a call. I can't really tell from the lights now whether that person is still on the line, but it seems that somebody wanted to answer your question.
Well, let's try 'em.
I apologize if this is not a call. Melissa, are you there? Melissa? Hello? Nope.
Well.
Okay.
In fact, there is one photograph already. It was not
phone number should be up on the screen.
Yeah, leave the phone number up. Thank you. There is actually one photograph that they managed to get of a planet around another star. The star is GQ Lupi, and the planet in question is a gas giant twice as massive as Jupiter, orbiting its star at 100 times the distance that the Earth is from the Sun. So it's like there's a big separation between them. And in the photograph, it's like this great big bright ball. That's the Sun. And it looks like touching it is this little tiny blob of light. And that's what it looks like right now with the telescopes they have, trying to take pictures of other star systems. When they get this Keck interferometer up and running, that giant ball that's the glare of the Sun is going to shrink down to its proper size.
Wow.
Yeah, that's terribly exciting.
Cool technology.
I'm really looking forward to seeing those pictures.
Yeah.
All right.
This is the day when I didn't bring material. Although I could do another what I got scolded for on the show yesterday.
Yeah.
And
what did I scold you for?
Plugging my blog.
Oh, go ahead and plug your blog.
Plugging my blog. Right now on the blog, there is a lengthy interview, and this is at. I'm going to need the title up if you've still got it, but it's at kazimscorner.blogspot.com. And I have just read Darwin's Black Box by Michael Behe, and this is one of the sort of seminal works in the intelligent design movement. It's about 10 years old, and I finally got around to reading the whole thing and wrote a review that's about 9 pages if you would bother to print it out. I'd like a version to go up in the next ACA newsletter, but I'm going to have to trim it down hugely. So if you're interested, there's the address down at the bottom of the screen where you can read what I talk about. And Behe is the smart biochemist in the intelligent design movement, who basically says that sure, evolution happens, sure, random mutation and natural selection can do a lot of stuff, but it can't account for the subatomic, or not subatomic, but for the microorganism level things that happen. Cells are extremely complicated, and they're so complicated that they're magic. Is what it comes down to, basically. And one of the things that I noticed while reading the book was that at times he appears to make things way more complicated than they actually are. At least that seemed to be the impression that I had while reading the book. And then I posted this on Talk.Origins, the news group, and some guy came back and said, yeah, I'm a biochemist, and he chose the absolute most incomprehensible way to explain everything. I could do a much better job of explaining what he did. And then, of course, he gets to intelligent design, which, means now that I've supposedly ruled out any scientific explanation, there must be a designer, which is preposterous, because he never even established that there is anything that is capable of being a designer, which is kind of putting the cart before the horse, because a designer like the one he proposes would be the kind of the most complicated thing in the universe. And so if complexity is a difficult thing to explain, then how do you explain the existence of this thing?
Right.
Okay, so we have a call. We're going to go to Chris.
Hey
Hello?
guys, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Long-time caller. I really enjoy the show. I think I call probably every week. Just wanted to bring light to the fact that without the investigation that goes into finding out about science and finding out about astronomy, that a lot of things that we take for granted today, as far as technology, wouldn't be around. I wanted to make light of the fact that Galileo was excommunicated from the church. I think it was 500 years ago. And just to sort of give a shout-out to everybody out there. I know there are a lot of young people who just came back to UT, a lot of students, and just reminding everybody who's watching that, you're not in your parents' house right now. If you can investigate when you go to college about what truth is, then when are you going to do it? So you guys have a great show, and I just wanted to give shout-outs and props to what you're doing. I love the show.
Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks.
All right. Take care, man.
There's a huge part of the Christian apologetics industry that's targeted at college kids because they're terrified that college kids. Well, there seems to be a very high attrition rate from religion when kids actually go to college.
Oh, sure. It's called education.
And, it's funny that when you get smarter and stop believing in religion or get more educated, that's seen as an indictment of education and not as an indictment of religion.
Well, I guess that's just to be expected from people who have decided before they knew anything that they already had the answer. What else are you going to say when people learn something and go away and stop agreeing with you? Well, you've got to, if you were right all along, then it must be that there was something that they were told while they were getting educated that blinded them to the truth.
Yeah, that's certainly true. We had actually a discussion over lunch, which I think is kind of relevant to that, which was about learning peer pressure. And talking about how Christians homeschool a lot, and not to talk about an argument about whether it's a good idea in general to homeschool. It is true that a lot of the thing about, a lot of the big deal about homeschooling for Christians in particular is that it's sort of a way of insulating their kids from the rest of the world.
Right, homeschooling and or vouchers. So that they can send their kids to schools that will only tell them what the parents want them to hear.
Yeah, and there was a particular thing that your wife said that was interesting, which is that peer pressure seems to work most effectively in groups of 6 or less. Like it's been studied and shown that if you've got like 6 people together, it's easy for them to sort of form a majority opinion and then mutually reinforce each other and only say things that they already believe. And once you add 7 or higher numbers, you suddenly start getting enough diversity in the group that it's sort of it breaks up the little clique.
It leaves room for differing opinions.
Right, and we think that's a good thing.
Sure.
We think that the more different opinions you get, the better, because part of the way you find things out about the world is that you weigh different options against each other and you sort of logically parse them and try to come up with a way of choosing between them rationally. And the less opinions that you have, the less likely it is that you're going to wind up with the right answer, because if you get the wrong answer, you'll never know.
Right.
And Manda said it's no coincidence that when you see homeschooling handbooks from Christian apologists, typically you'll see that they say that the ideal class size for your little homeschooling group is 6 or less.
Well, yeah.
or something like that.
I find it fascinating that we're not getting any calls
I do
on
too.
the day when, there's this challenge out there to believers in some invisible guy having created this all, to explain the observations of astronomers. And we had one caller who was like there for a few seconds and then left before we got to her.
Right, and usually the phone lines are just exploding at this point in the show.
That's it?
And
That's the best you people can do? Okay, fine, good.
Actually, I seem to have noticed that on days when I was the co-host and I would come in with a lengthy topic that was about something where I actually sort of knew what I was talking about. Mm-hmm. And this happened to my dad too, who's a physicist and knows a lot of stuff about science.
Right.
We just wouldn't get any calls on that topic.
Yeah. Fundamentalists are fine with attacking physicists when they can make caricatures of them in little religious tracts and then do their arguing with the cartoon of a
Right, the
physicist.
cartoon
There's an actual
blusters and
physicist.
says, "How dare you say anything that indicates that there's a God?"
Right.
Because blah blah blah.
Right. And,
Which my dad isn't like.
We're not physicists. We're just some people that have actually done some reading. And now we can't get a single response of some people defending their worldview, this worldview that's supposed to be the thing you have to believe in order to save the world from being evil. That's it? Nothing?
Who knows?
Wow. Amazing.
Well,
Amazing.
since clearly everybody agrees with what we're saying today, then we ought to invite them down to Mongolian barbecue after the show, since we've got an entire audience full of people who don't have anything bad to say about what we're saying. So at 6:45 after the show, we'll be meeting at Mongolian barbecue downtown at 117 San Jacinto. So actually, we do have a call at this point, and I'm going to go with James. Hello, James.
Hello.
Hi.
James?
Hey, I like your show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I was just calling, I was telling your screener, I was just calling to relate a little event that happened to me last week, last Sunday, actually. I was working on a home improvement project in my garage, and there's some kids riding bikes around the neighborhood, and I hear a young kid yell, "Stick 'em up!" And I turn around, and there's a kid there on his bike. He's probably 7, and he's holding a toy gun, and he shoots it up into the air, and it seems to shoot these little donut-shaped projectiles. And so then he asked me, "Did you go to church today?" And I said, "No." And well, actually, before that, I asked, "Where'd you get the gun?" He said, "They gave them out at church." And,
Wow.
Whoa.
Okay. Yeah.
Then,
Up until you said that, I was going to be like, well, kids,
That's
little
scary.
kids like shooting guns. What's the big deal? But they're actually encouraging that, huh?
I asked him, "Well, where'd you get the gun?" And he said, "Church." And I said, "Wow, they're handing out guns at church. That's kind of interesting." And he said, "Do you go to church?" And I said, "No, well, not anymore." And he said, "Well, then how else are you going to learn about Jesus?" And I just thought that was kind of a strange juxtaposition from gun to Jesus. And I'll just hang up.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I'm going to have kids like you come up to me and point a gun at me.
That, of course, is another answer. If you can't actually come up with a reasonable explanation of how your religion can make any freaking sense in light of actual scientific findings, what you can do is try to raise up a generation of little brainwashed robots with guns and try to use force to make everybody believe what you believe. And if that's anything like what you're thinking needs to be done in order for your side to win in this culture war that you people started, then shame on you.
Yeah. Of course, it does bring a question to mind, which is, who would Jesus mug?
I don't know. Probably nobody.
Okay.
Given the stories.
Given the stories. Next caller is Jake. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi.
Hi, Jake.
Yeah, you guys were forgetting that today is the big UT rally, I think. So that's probably, maybe that has some account.
Oh, I see.
The lack of the calls.
Is this still
What's going
about the football? Or
No. My question isn't about football.
No, I mean,
what is this thing that's going on?
What's up with this
rally?
rally?
As far as I know, I think there's a big UT rally and the homecoming sort of.
Oh.
No, it's ongoing.
Okay.
Because
is about religiosity and religious beliefs, especially with in regards to politics and especially the president. What I'm wondering is, do you think this would kind of be a great topic for a big group discussion or something, but do you ever think we'll see the day where we'll have an outright atheist or agnostic president? Someone who says, I don't believe in God, I'm not a Christian, or in fact, even better, an Islamic president, or someone do you think this country could ever accept something other than Christianity?
Wow, ever? Sure, of course. I mean, ever is a long time. And if you look in the past, our country has not always been in the death grip of right-wing, of fundamentalist extremists. That's just very recent. You look back, 20 years, 50 years, there have been periods of time when religiosity was not throttling everybody into submission.
Yeah, and of course, if you read what Thomas Jefferson wrote, I mean, he was about as close to an atheist as I would think we've ever had, even though he referred to himself as a deist.
Yeah, but deists are not Christians, so at least him, Thomas Jefferson is an example of a president we've had who was not a Christian.
I do have to say, on the flip side, though, that the way matters stand right now, there have been surveys done about who would you rather see as president, and I believe the answers came out that something like as bad an opinion as people have of say homosexuals, and as paranoid as people are about Muslims, thinking they're all terrorists, for instance, both of those groups poll better than atheists. And atheists tend to poll a person who is for atheists, for president. And a person who is an open atheist is like the rock bottom choice of most of the people polled. So that's kind of discouraging.
Yeah. The other example I can think of off the top of my head is in the 1800s, and I'm sorry I don't have the exact name or date in front of me, but there was an openly atheist governor of California in the 1800s at some point. I don't know his name.
Well, of course, recently there was an openly atheist governor of Minnesota.
Was there?
Jesse Ventura.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Now, he was kind of a crackpot in some other ways.
Well, okay, thanks for your call.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. We've got an odd topic on the next guy, but I guess I'll go with it anyway. Tim?
Hello.
Hi, Tim.
What's happening?
Not much.
All right. Okay, so Godzilla versus God. Who'd win? Since they're both, mythological creatures or whatnot. Since we created both of them anyway.
So it's logically impossible that the fight would actually happen.
Sure, but as speaking as a fantasy gamer, I'm used to these hypothetical which fictitious character would win in a fist fight. Obviously, the Christian God would win if it existed, and if Godzilla existed, and the two of them had a fight.
I'll go with that.
Of course, why there'd be a Godzilla in a universe where there was a god who supposedly made everything and would prevent things like giant radiation-spewing monsters existing so they could go attack Tokyo, does that answer your question?
Relatively. I also want to know if you have a favorite Godzilla film, like...
Versus Mothra.
Mothra? All right.
Absolutely, hands down.
I am sadly culturally ignorant of most of the Godzilla phenomenon.
Oh, man.
In fact, I think I've only seen the Matthew Broderick version, which is pathetic, I know.
Oh, dude. Well, you got to start somewhere.
Though Destroy All Monsters is also pretty darn good.
All right, I versus Monster Zero is my personal favorite. That's the one where he goes into space. They go to a different planet and battle the Hydra again.
Yeah.
Yes, well, this is somewhat off topic, but thanks for your call, Tim.
Have a good day.
Come on, we use up vast quantities of our audio show time talking about like City of Heroes and stuff.
That is true.
But then that's just us filling in airtime. Okay.
Okay, well, keep the calls coming. Next we have DC. Hello.
Yes, sir. How you doing tonight?
Fine.
I guess late afternoon. I wanted to know what your take is on the historical reference to Jesus and the fact that they based the calendar, on his birth date and death, and third day he rose. And what's your take on that? On the fact that the calendar is based on him?
Well, that happened centuries after the guy was supposed to exist. And the first writings about the Jesus character date from decades after he was already dead. There is no reason at all to think that even if he existed, we have any idea whatsoever what his birthday was.
Right.
And in fact, we know that the Romans picked that day to be Jesus' birthday because of convenient cultural reasons, when they were doing the switchover.
There are actually, I think, 3 different questions when dealing with questions of the historicity of Jesus. One level is, was there even such a guy that existed and sort of fit the profile of who they said he was in the Bible? The second thing is the Bible really an accurate description of the things he really said and the events that took place during his life? And 3, did he really have magic powers?
Right. And on question number 2, the answer to question 2, according to a group of scholars that ran this thing called the Jesus Seminar, where they examined all the available evidence. These are qualified biblical scholars, okay? These are not atheists trying to disprove anything.
Right.
The Jesus Seminar concluded that based on available evidence, there is very, very, very little in the way of quotes attributed to Jesus in the New Testament that could even remotely be considered reliable.
Right, so that's one place you could fall. Another place is where Thomas Jefferson fell, where he said, where he wrote his own Bible by basically taking the New Testament, meshing all the 4 Gospels together, chopping out all the supernatural bits, and then just coming up with a little teeny tiny handbook of the things that Jesus supposedly said. So Jefferson was willing to go so far as to say, yeah, there was a Jesus, and yeah, he said what the Bible said he said, but the magic stuff is clearly bunk. Personally, I fall sort of halfway between 2 and 3, which is I'm not that convinced that there, or is it, no, halfway between 1 and 2. I'm not that convinced that there necessarily was a Jesus at all, but it's not that big a deal to me if there was, because clearly there's nothing like enough evidence to show that he had magic powers if he did exist.
Right.
Okay.
And then the clincher would be the number 3, which is, if there's no evidence that that Jesus, even if he existed, actually had any magical powers, then what he said is all pretty much irrelevant, because wise things have been said, to the extent that what Jesus said was wise, which is not all the time.
Some of it.
Wise things have been said by other figures in history who we have much better evidence for their existence without them having to have had any magical powers.
Correct.
So, one can appreciate the advice without making the leap of logic that therefore he must have been a space god.
What do you take on the fact that the Bible does have references to war, violence, pestilence? I mean, really some serious bad stuff goes on in there.
Well, there have been wars, violence, and pestilence throughout history, so that's no big surprise.
You're right, that's no big surprise,
but the fact that some of it is condoned, especially in the Old Testament, is kind of bothersome if you want to use that book as your moral guide.
Yeah, there was a fine web page up on the internet, which is gone now. I have a copy of it at home. If you want me to read the death toll, I can. Can you take the call for a second?
Can I?
These guys went through the Bible and they wrote down all the incidents of people being killed by God or by the followers of God at His command in the Bible.
Yes.
And added up the numbers, and I can find that statistic for you in a minute.
We can just sum that up and have it.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's many.
A lot killed by God and like 2 killed indirectly by the devil.
1.
Okay.
Who's that one?
Hang on.
Somebody related to Job.
Okay, killed by God.
That's right.
The grand total comes to more than, and it's more than because in some cases the Bible just says many, and it's not possible to come up with an exact number. More than 399,933 people killed directly by God in the Bible. And that's not counting, say, the entire population of the world at the time of Noah, 3 cities, and other such things where they didn't give specific numbers, and more than 2,017,956 people killed by His followers in the Bible, compared with one guy, which is, what is it, Lot? No, not Lot. Who's the guy that has the whole book about how God dumps on him?
Job.
Job!
That's what I said.
Yeah, Job.
Job doesn't get killed though.
Oh, crumbs! I've got my Bible wrong on that count.
Probably one of Job's relatives or something. I don't know.
But if your question is what would we think if there was a God that went around and was responsible for that much killing, I'd be deeply creeped out.
Yeah.
Glad I'm pretty sure there's not any such thing.
Okay, very good answers, by the way. Thank you for your intellect. I'd like to say, though, commenting, not in rebuttal or nothing, but I want to say that what I've read in the Bible as far as what Jesus said, it wasn't that the magical powers was what existed. It was the presence of just a power, period.
Yeah, well, I mean, the turning water into wine is like a violation of fundamental laws of physics, and whether you want to call that magic or use some other word for what that supernatural power was, I don't care. The question is there any evidence that such things can ever actually happen? And the answer is no.
Does it defy the law of physics?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Doesn't, in fact, isn't that wine, water made out of water? Isn't grape water?
There is some water in wine. Is that your point?
No,
I'm not even sure how much.
There is some water in people, at like 75%, but it wouldn't be accurate to say that we are water.
Right. I agree with you. I just want to say that as far as the readings go, I personally have seen, experienced, what have you. I guess this Jesus thing works for some people.
Well, sure.
In what sense?
In the fact that I've seen some of what they call the fruits of the spirit or whatever they call it. I've seen people actually excel and become better human beings.
Sure, and I know atheists who have excelled and been better human beings too. I mean, that's just a question of motivation. That doesn't prove the existence of the deity.
Right.
It doesn't prove the existence of the Jesus. It just proves that, this is a set of beliefs which can be motivational. Well, yeah, but so what?
And don't get us wrong. I mean, it's not like we're here saying that being religious makes you a bad person.
Right.
It's just some people are religious, some people are not religious. Some people do get nicer over time. Some people get worse over time. And there seems to be no apparent relationship between those things.
But thanks very much for your call.
Yeah, thanks for calling.
I'll call back.
All right, see ya. You can also, if you aren't done with the discussion, or if you don't manage to get on today, email tv@atheist-community.org, and that'll give us a whole week to have a discussion with you about your chosen topic right there on the bottom of your screen. I've also been asked repeatedly from the control room to keep reminding you that after the show today, at around 6:45, we will all, Jeff and I and the cast and crew, and the rest of the crew, which is quite sizable, will be going to Mongolian Barbecue, 117 San Jacinto, downtown. And it was also mentioned that since college is starting up again, this is a great time for college kids who may be new and don't have that many contacts to come hang out with the group and see what we're like.
Have we still got no callers willing to address the astronomy issues?
Right. You might want to repeat the question.
I should have brought this up with the last caller. Well, here's the thing, right? I mean, the big knockdown drag-out fight over evolution in Dover, Pennsylvania is over, and the courts have ruled that no, sorry, intelligent design is just repackaged creationism, which is just a set of religious beliefs, and it's not appropriate for the government to be indoctrinating kids in public schools into the beliefs of one particular religion. So, and even though that fight is still ongoing, I don't expect the believers in intelligent design or / creationism to just roll over and take that. They will probably fight it more, but the writing's on the wall, I think, ultimately, that it is clear that that's not going to work. So it seems to me the next question is, well, you know, you can still, if you're coming from the perspective of a believer, if you really believe that it is important for other people to believe that your God exists, you got to back up to the next thing, which is, oh, well, he created the universe. And that gets into questions of astronomy, cosmology, and when it comes to the evidence for the development and evolution of star systems, the evidence is like even more solid than it is for evolution, because we've got telescopes that can look out in space and see solar systems in every stage of stellar formation, you know, from before they're stars to after they've exploded. It's all right out there, and it's only telescopes are only getting better, and the evidence is only going to get more definitive. So I'm just curious what believers say about the fact that the universe looks like it's just matter being affected by natural laws. So.
Okay, so there's a question.
I probably could have done that faster, but we got time to fill.
If anyone wants to address it, and in the meantime, we'll just go to Jay.
Well, I'm not there for your question.
No, that's all right.
I watched something the
What do you
other
got,
night,
Jay?
real late on TV, and it came out of, if I'm not mistaken, South Carolina, where a minister had two-timed on his wife because she hadn't been ill off and on. So anyway, the lady he was messing around with is now pregnant. So this came out into the congregation of the church. So all of them sit there and they had an open discussion instead of a regular church meeting that they had, I guess, the board of directors, whatever God runs the church down there, trying to find out what do we do with him. Do we kick him out of the church? Do we penalize him and not pay him and make him work for a year with that salary? And all of the different things that they came up. Well, according to what I was raised as, and going to Sunday school and all that, and to those up in middle youth and all that. Anyway, there was a...
I guess maybe the biblical answer is throw rocks at his head until he dies.
Well, I know, because they said in the Bible, they condemn adultery. And it's the sin. So they really in an uproar over it, and so I was just sitting there thinking, I said, well, God, if half the people were standing still behind him, oh, well, he made one mistake. And they didn't want to do nothing. You know, we can just forgive him. And as staunch as it is in South Carolina, in the Bible Belt, you have to be down that way to know how big of an issue really that would have been in the church. it's not so bad that way here, because I know ministers walked out of churches that's done the same thing right here, and nothing's never happened to them. But down there, it made it, and it was really a good. I wish I taped it that night, and I would have sent it to you so y'all could look at it and realize how big it stayed on for about an hour and 45 minutes.
So this pastor got caught committing adultery.
Yeah.
And they decided just to do nothing.
Most of them are deciding to leave him there. That God, they just fell in love. People say, "Oh, we just love him. He's too good. He's this."
This is one of those things where, speaking as an atheist, I'm very, very torn. Because on the one hand, I want to jump up and down and point fingers, because I'm so annoyed with how full of themselves religious people can be. To, point this out and say, look at them being hypocrites, right?
Right.
But the other part of me wants to go, they shouldn't be in the business of getting all in people's personal affairs in the first place. And it seems to me like a very sensible thing to decide that, well, it's none of our business what this guy does personally. It's between him and his wife.
Yeah, I personally, if somebody were to ask me for my personal advice, I would say, if you're married, don't get into an affair unless you're really sure that that's what you want to do. Some couples actually have an understanding. I'm not part of one of those couples, and I wouldn't cheat on my wife. But it's not my personal business what somebody else does, even if they happen to be employed by me, if it's outside of work.
Right.
So, I don't think they should care, but according to their weird religion, which is all hung up about sex, they really ought to care. So, I'm torn.
Yeah.
It's sort of strange, I know the way that it is, because some of the people were real, oh God, just went fanatically, because they couldn't believe he did it. But yet
there's a lot of that going around, too.
And I know in all walks of life, rich, poor, anything, and it happens. Yeah. And it's happening, I say, even in your big politicians, put it that way. So then they sit down there and try to say, hey, follow this way in the Christian right, and yet, tough luck. Yeah. It's not what I do, but what I'm going to tell you. And that's the whole deal.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your call.
Yeah, thanks for calling. Bye.
Yeah, that's what I really wish would happen is people would just relax, stop trying to force each other to live according to pretty irrational, primitive codes of behavior that were that were used within a completely different culture than ours 2,000 years ago, and just, be sensitive, be sensible, be rational, be, and work on, enabling one another to get along rather than just trying to force this abstract set of this abstract behavior code on each other. That's what I wish. But if they're gonna concentrate on trying to force each other to behave certain ways, then it is kind of annoying when they don't live up to that themselves and think they can get away without criticism.
Right. And on a side note, I'd like to point out that a lot of Christians like to say that our laws are based on the Bible and the Ten Commandments, and this really highlights one of the ways in which it's not, because committing adultery is one of the big thou shalt nots in the Bible. Right. In our laws, we got divorce rules, but
that's it.
Yeah, that's
basically
it. You can't really, there's really no law saying that you can do anything with people who've gone that way.
Okay.
All right, we're going next to Alex.
Yes. I was wondering, do y'all believe in an afterlife?
No.
Nope, we're atheists.
Is that it? He's done?
Well, I think the warning from the studio was enough for me.
Okay.
I'm gonna. Is this the same DC who called in earlier? Let's check. Hello.
Yes, it is.
All right. Hi again.
I was wondering, I grew up in school, and we studied evolution in school, and it was very realistic and seemed like that is the way it is, that, we migrated and mutated into the human beings that we are today. The scientists I've been reading have said that, like, their fossilization studies on actually how old things are, they're not really sure if they're correct anymore. Like, they're not sure if it's 65 million or 100 billion years anymore. Are we ever going to know for sure? I mean,
Well,
is it ever going to be totally proven that there's no God?
well,
You know what I'm saying?
Can I take the God question first?
Yes, sir.
In order to disprove something, you have to have a solid definition of what it is.
Oh.
And the problem with God is that believers tend to describe him in very, very vague terms, so that he's inherently untestable as he's described. That doesn't mean there's good reason to think that he exists. It just means it's such a nebulous concept that how are you going to disprove a thing like that, right? Also, on this, in answer to your straightforward question, I don't think we're ever going to know all of everything. In fact, as I understand information theory, that's probably not possible to know all of everything. That doesn't mean it's not worthwhile fighting to learn as much as we can. Nor does it mean that we should look with skepticism, with serious skepticism on everything we think we know. We just need to be prepared to go back and revisit when we encounter evidence that things we thought were true before might not be.
Mm-hmm.
And third, it's not like religion offers any alternative. There is a website. Some TV station it wasn't the Discovery Channel, but it was one of those outfits. Had a special on the apocalypse when the year 2000 was rolling around, and they have a timeline showing all of the different times when people, by reading the Bible and trying to interpret what it said in there, thought that the world was going to end. And it happened over and over and over again. And at no point did the believers say, this is just a pointless exercise. The Bible is not a clear definition that we can interpret that tells us when the end is going to be. Instead, people even today keep coming up with new predictions that they claim are proved by this or that bit of the Bible. Even worse, this whole what we currently understand as the fundamentalist view that there's going to be a rapture and people are going to bodily ascend and all this stuff. That was officially formulated in the 1800s. That's not a set of beliefs that goes back to the origins of Christianity. That is a relatively recent interpretation of what the Bible says. So, you can complain or wistfully wonder, well, will science ever tell us everything? Will science ever be a discipline where we know things for sure? But it's not like, the answer is probably no, but it's not like religion offers us anything anywhere near as good. It's got all of the uncertainty and all of the change over time, but without any basis in evidence to justify the beliefs that you have at any point in time.
Okay. So I read a book called The Big Lie. Have you ever read that?
No.
Is it about evolution?
It's about how a man wrote the book, and it basically says that how, way back when, mankind formulated religion and God for profit.
Religion.
And that basically that whole book was written for a trade, a profession, for people to carry through. And I just believe that, from reading the Bible, I've read it, I've been at theology school and all that, and the Hebrew language is the most difficult language to interpret in the world. Are you aware of that?
Is this actually objectively measurable?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's very hard. There's so many variables that are hard to take literally. You see what I'm saying?
I had a bar mitzvah once, and I remember the big pain is that the vowels are optional.
Yes.
So, and the original Torah doesn't have vowels. So, I mean, as Dave Barry once said about the Japanese language, just a small change to one symbol will change something from let's go to dinner to let's have sex with ostriches. I don't think it's quite that bad, but
it's not quite that bad.
Yeah, it's a tricky language.
But I'll take your word for it.
Sure.
Hebrew is hard to translate. What's your point?
Okay.
Well, my point is this. Everybody who is non-atheist, it's not, I shouldn't put it that way. I don't have anything against you guys. You guys have the right to believe what you want to, and God bless you. I don't receive that. But Jesus did walk the earth. There's many scrolls that were written by colleagues that weren't even Christians, people who persecuted the Christians, people who didn't like Jesus, Romans, other countrymen from other countries, things from Egypt. I mean, there's documentation that Jesus of Nazareth was born and walked on the earth.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that he was God's son.
Actually, no. I mean, there are a lot of there is a relatively small body of works that are pointed to by believers as evidence of Jesus. None of them is from a direct witness. Many of them, it's entirely questionable whether they're talking about the same particular character. And most of them are only mentioning that, there are these guys going around calling themselves Christians, as if that was proof that therefore there was a Christ. Now, I'm aware of things like Josephus and other texts like that are pointed at as evidence.
Yes, sir.
They're very, very, very questionable and sketchy. Yeah, I mean I've got something on that too. If you want me to haul it out.
Yeah, even St. Paul, who wrote a whole lot of the post-gospel Bibles.
Bible
books.
Of the New Testament.
I think I've seen once it was mentioned that even Paul doesn't actually claim to have met Jesus while he was alive. He claims to have seen Jesus as a spirit, and that's and that's hard to take at face value, and it's what a large section of the rules of Christianity are based on is just his word for it.
The fact that he died a martyr, and he used to persecute Christians, what have you. I mean, killed them, beat them, flogged them, and then all of a sudden he turns his whole life around. Why would he do that?
Assuming it's true and not as made up as that guy who's all over the news right now with his book about his drug addiction, that's turning out to be largely made up. I mean, people do make stuff up. Even if that's not true, we're back to the question of inspiration. Just because a set of beliefs is inspirational doesn't mean that they're accurate.
Right. I mean, people. It's a well-known fact that people believe crazy things for. That people believe. I shouldn't say crazy. People believe false things and are willing to die for them. I mean, just look at. Let's see, a few years ago we had some people who flew planes into buildings because they thought that that this would make God really happy. A few years before that we had a suicide cult in California, just about 30 miles from where I used to live, that poisoned themselves because they thought they would be magically transported to a spaceship. And we could get into the whole Waco thing, which is kind of a sore point with some people. But here was this guy saying that he was basically the Messiah. It's certainly not a remarkable claim that somebody could suffer and die for something they really believe, and it could still be wrong.
What about the historical content of the Jews, period?
What do you mean? The historical content of the Jews?
Yeah, just the basic history. I mean,
there were real Jews.
Yeah, what's your point? Yes, there were Jews, and
so do you think, or believe that none of those things that actually happened in the Old Testament?
None of the things in the Old Testament?
Wait, which of those things has anything to do with proving the existence of the God or the Jesus?
Because for some reason they've all been correlated together into this one. They're the chosen people, and he's their God. And then because of Jesus, it's like the Gentiles are grafted into this situation, and then now they have the possibility of becoming in His grace and all that. I mean, is the historical facts of the Jewish culture from way back, is it true or not?
No, I mean, we're not saying anything about whether the historical facts are wrong. I mean, like, if I were a future historian, I could pick up a Spider-Man comic.
Yes, sir.
And I could look in that Spider-Man comic and say, look here, Peter Parker, this guy lives in New York, right? New York's a real place. This panel here clearly shows him climbing up the Empire State Building. We know the Empire State Building really existed. I'm pretty sure some comics even refer to real current events, like at some point Peter Parker might say something about President Bush. They could go, yeah, that's a historical fact. None of that has any bearing on the fact that there's no Spider-Man.
Except in comic books.
The point is, it's entirely possible. That is the Spider-Man. The Spider-Man analogy is evidence that human beings are entirely capable of writing works of fiction, incorporating facts. Just because the facts are facts doesn't make it all fact.
And at that time, we're not talking about correlating ancient history. We're talking about people writing things that take place in the context of the society where they really live. I mean, it would be a really hard thing to do to not only make up a bunch of supernatural stuff, but also make up a completely fictional nation where they all live. Why bother?
Right, but we should probably move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because we've had you on for a long time. Thanks, thanks, DC.
Appreciate you.
Sure. I mean, I recognize that that many people who are believers justify their belief to themselves by being impressed by things like, well, there's this ancient book that says so. But just because there's any book that says anything doesn't prove that thing is true. And there are things that constitute solid, verifiable, trustworthy evidence, and then there's everything else. Unfortunately, what's lacking in the case of Jesus is the solid, verifiable, trustworthy evidence that there was ever any such guy. Not that I care, because as far as I'm concerned, even if there was a guy, as long as he doesn't have magical powers, then it's still not proof that the religion is true. And as yet, there's been no evidence that those kinds of magical powers are ever possessed by anybody.
Right.
So, anyway.
Okay, next we have Jerry.
Hello?
Hello.
I recently saw a news article where this guy named Josiah, who is a priest, was arrested because he was in a movie theater messing with some kid's private.
Yeah, that's a lot more common than you might think. That's not an isolated incident. There's this whole thing going on with the Catholic Church.
Yeah, so that just means, like, maybe if you're a priest for a while, you just go crazy and you break out in outrageous, spontaneous events.
I don't know.
Not all priests do that.
No, certainly. I'm not. Just saying it's more common than just that one story. And I don't know what the psychology of it is, and there's people that have argued that it's merely the cover provided by being a religious authority that is attractive to people who already have such tendencies and want to be able to get away with it. There's people who say, well, it's the kind of life you have to lead as a preacher that drives you to doing things that extreme. There's people that say it's merely after the fact, once you become the preacher and you have all this trust, that it just gives you opportunities to do things that otherwise you never would have even considered. I don't know which of those things are true. But it is true that there is an actual problem with there's a big famous thing about the Catholic Church, but there are incidents from all kinds of different stripes of religion, and not just Christianity, of these kinds of abuses. So there you go.
Well, have you heard? Well, I was recently visited by a man called the Singing Atheist. And
Okay.
traveled.
Yeah, I guess I know what that okay means.
Yeah, that's that. Okay.
This looks like a good call coming up. Jack?
Hi, Jack.
Hi.
Listen, assuming you guys are correct, what sort of philosophical way do you approach life? I mean, you're going to cast away the Ten Commandments and some other things.
No. It happens. It just does so happen that several of the Ten Commandments are reasonably good advice.
Yeah, but I mean,
just because somebody is an atheist doesn't mean that anything that some religion has claimed for its own is therefore something we reject just because it's got a religion label attached to it. Like, I'm all in favor of not killing. I think that's a fine piece of advice, but not because any religion said so.
Well,
just to clarify.
The Christian Church has been working on the Bible for probably 500 or 600 years before it kind of got into the King James Version.
Right.
And I just wondered if there's some set of folks in the atheist community that is working on something similar, so that somebody that doesn't believe in God has some sort of reasonable way that they can organize their life.
All right. Well, there's actually a couple of things here. First of all, is there a set of rules, or is there a philosophy that all atheists can follow? And the second thing is, what about us, personally? The answer to the first question would be nope. The thing is, there's a basic difference between atheism and religion, which is atheism, which is not a religion, doesn't have tenets, basically. There are all kinds of atheists. There are some people called the Raelians that I like to bring up. They technically do not believe in God, but they believe in aliens from outer space who wrote something which eventually got sort of turned into the Bible. And they sort of pigeonhole different portions of the Bible and explain it via aliens. Technically, those people are atheists. I don't agree with a thing that they think, nearly.
Well, one thing.
But they're atheists. I know atheists of all different political and philosophical stripes. I actually happen to be comfortable calling myself a humanist, for instance, which means that the most important values are those that make people happy. But I know atheists who are downright misanthropes and just don't like other people. Atheism is just a lack of belief in God. It's nothing else. The rest is kind of up to you. There's no atheist church. There's no atheist pope. And you can't really get atheists to agree to one particular set of guidelines because they're all coming at atheism from different angles in their life. Now, the other thing would, of course, be speaking for myself. And I know that Jeff and I probably share fairly similar views on this sort of thing. I do think that I like being comfortable, happy, and having fun. And by extension and by empathy, I understand that the rest of the people, the rest of the 6 billion people who also live in this world, also generally want to be comfortable, happy, and having fun. And anything that I can do to enjoy myself and not get in the way of other people enjoying themselves can be seen as something that's a worthy goal that I should work towards. That doesn't mean that I'm selfish or a hedonist, because one of the ways that I make myself comfortable, happy, and having fun is by loving my family, by raising my kids, by doing good work and reaching out to other people and and being involved in politics and hopefully working with trying to figure out what kind of system maximizes people's happiness.
Sounds like a kind of a long-winded explanation of the golden rule, right?
The golden rule is a good rule of thumb. Wasn't original to Jesus.
Well, yeah, okay. So, but it's still a pretty good rule.
Can I give you my response? I think it'll be a little less long than Russell's.
It's my last day as host.
Fair enough. I mean, there is a very important thing in what you're asking, Jack, which is, it's still a good. There's even okay. If one does not accept some supposedly divinely inspired set of instructions on how to live, one still has to live. And presumably there are good ways to do that. Good in a secular sense of productive, helpful, and rewarding ways to live. And then there are ways that are not good, not productive, not helpful. Russell was right in saying there is no one atheist ideology about how you should live, except for the understanding that good instructions on how to live, effective instructions on how to have a decent life, don't come from ancient books supposedly penned by invisible men in the sky. There are a couple of examples that I can point out if you're interested in seeing what various different non-believers have said about this. There was a guy named Dan Barker who is an ex-Christian minister. He has a couple of children's books out addressing this question because, of course, that's when you're young is when you need to learn these things. One book is called, and I think I've got the titles correct. I might be a little off on these. I think the first one is Maybe Yes, Maybe No. It's a book about critical thinking. It's how to make good, rational decisions. And the other one is Maybe Right, Maybe Wrong, which is about morality. And that's more directly in response to your question.
And those are both excellent books, even if you're not a child. If you're interested at all in the atheist viewpoint, you could do worse than picking up those two books.
Maybe Right, Maybe Wrong approaches morality from the standpoint of principles, not rules. It's because in real life there are moral dilemmas. Moral dilemmas are real. They're not when you're in a moral dilemma, it doesn't mean you don't know what the one perfect rule is that you ought to follow. When you're in a moral dilemma, it means there's two things that are so closely good or so closely bad that it's really, really hard to make a good decision. And so that book, Maybe Right, Maybe Wrong, explores the issue of moral principles and how you come to understand, how to come to look at the world in terms of principles, and how you deal with the fact that sometimes there are just going to be tragic conflicts. Another place that I hesitate to mention because certain brands of Christians have labeled these people the Antichrist, and but who's going to believe them? There is an organization called the Council for Secular Humanism, and secular humanism is a philosophical view that the way people need to live is by figuring out how to get along as human beings. They have put out a document called the Humanist Manifesto, which talks about what humanist principles are, and there are a number of other books addressing that, and it's all about how to get along with your fellow human beings in light of not believing that there's some God telling you how to be. Does that help?
Yeah. Can I ask you one more question?
Actually, we're out of time.
Okay.
You can email us, but I want to thank you for calling because that was an interesting topic, and I could have thought of worse ways to spend my last 10 minutes as the host.
Thanks, Jack.
Everyone who didn't get on the air can email tv@atheist-community.org, and And other than that, you can meet us in 45 minutes from now at 117 San Jacinto, downtown at Mongolian Barbecue. Check the website for details. Thanks, everybody, for letting me into your homes for 6 months. You won't see me next week, but I'll be back in a few weeks as the co-host, and it's been great fun being your host. Goodbye, everyone, and have a good evening.
Bye-bye.